Hello from the Heartland. My name is Jenna, and this is Smarter News. News when it matters and why it matters. Our Smarter series features unique people who help us think and live smarter. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Smarter News. I'm Jenna, and I'm so glad that you're here today for a first on Smarter News. We have a guest host today, and I want to give her a proper introduction. I first met Hollie McKay, a veteran war reporter, writer, journalist, over Zoom at this time last year. Zoom is where all good relationships bloom during a pandemic. And that was true for us, but Hollie was actually in a strategic city in Afghanistan at a very critical time. We were hearing that the Taliban was gaining ground and it was feared that they would take over the country, and Hollie was on the ground there reporting. So I reached out to her and we did our first interview, and little did I know what would happen after that interview. In the days that followed, the Taliban took over Afghanistan, and Hollie found herself effectively trapped, wondering what her next steps would be. As we know, she was able to navigate that period and spent the next several months reporting in Afghanistan when so many other people had left. She had spent time in the country before, but her reporting at this critical period for the months after the fall and the United States withdrawal were really important. She did a lot of really important work, and she contributed to us here at Smarter News, which I am so grateful for. And during that time period, not only did we develop this working relationship, but very quickly developed a friendship. I was worried about Hollie. I really respect and admire her work, and I really connect with her when it comes to journalism. So it's a really special friendship that I'm very, very grateful for. And that friendship has continued for the last year. So over the last few weeks, we were speaking about marking this year, the year since we first met, the year since the Taliban took over Afghanistan and the United States withdrawal. And I was expressing that I really was hoping to do something special for Smarter News, something that had insight and depth, something that not everyone would do. And Hollie volunteered for me to speak with her fixer. And let me just pause there for a second. A fixer is a very, very important person for any journalist. You're going to hear Hollie talk about this, and she's worked with many fixers and understands the value. I'm going to give you a little bit of an elementary definition of it. So just imagine if I parachuted into your living room and didn't really know where everything was in your town or city, and I needed help. I was going to report on the issues in your area, but I didn't know anything. And you are going to be my guide. You are going to be my fixer. But a guide doesn't really explain it. The fixer is a partner, is really a partner in this process of gathering information, doing reporting. You may tell me who the key person is to speak with in your city, what streets to avoid, where to eat, how to get medical care. Maybe you do some translation for me. You are a key part of my work. My life and livelihood at times may depend upon you. So this is a very, very special relationship. And it speaks to Hollie that she volunteered for me to connect with someone that was so important to her, who, by the way, is still in Afghanistan. And I really appreciated that offer. And I thought about it for a second. And I said, Hollie, that's really generous, but I think you should talk to Naweed. That is her fixer. I said, that's the conversation I actually want to hear. I'd love to speak to him, but your special relationship, and for you two to reflect on what you've been through together, that's where it's really going to be at, understanding the behind the scenes for that and getting his perspective now on what it's like to live in Afghanistan. And so that is what you are going to hear. You're going to hear this amazing conversation between two people that witness history together. And it sort of sounds at time like they're reflecting on a vacation or a work trip, but they're in these situations that very few of us could imagine. And I'll wait for you to experience that. I did put together for you, though, a quick cliff notes, because they're going to talk about many different places in Afghanistan. Afghanistan is a big country. Many of us haven't been there. I don't want any of these names to be speed bumps in your listening to this conversation. So I'm just going to give you a couple key words that they use, a couple key places that they used and mentioned and referenced. And that way you have a little bit of the lay of the land before we get into their conversation. So Naweed is in Kabul. As you know, Kabul is the capital city in Afghanistan, a big city with millions of people. Hollie was in a place that she refers to as Mazar. Mazar-e-Sharif was the city, the northern city. So that's like a full day's trip to Kabul. So it's not close to Kabul when we first met, and she's going to mention being in Mazar and what that was like. She's also going to mention a place called Kandahar. Kandahar is a province in Afghanistan, so it's a big area, but it's also a city, and it's a really important area. This city is essentially the birthplace of the Taliban, because the founder of the Taliban, Mullah Omar, someone you're also going to hear referenced, ran a mosque in that area where the group began. Remember, Talib roughly means student. So when we're talking about the Talibans or the Taliban, that's sort of the reference to this group that was the followers of Mullah Omar at the time. You're also going to hear Hollie and Naweed talk about Spin Boldak. That's a border area between Kandahar and Pakistan. The border between Afghanistan and Pakistan is really critical, because when we talk about Al-Qaeda and Al-Qaeda in this part of the world, oftentimes we're talking about what's been referenced as the tribal areas of Pakistan, or the areas of Pakistan along this border in Afghanistan where Al-Qaeda would be. And the exchange of not only people, but information, tools, strategy between the Taliban and Al-Qaeda obviously has been a closely examined relationship. So really understanding that these border areas are important for the people of Afghanistan now, but also historically. I just wanted to make sure that we reference that. Also referenced is the province of Nangarhar. Hollie's going to mention that, and there's a specific place there where there was an ISIS area, and that's another kind of different part of the country. She's also going to mention Korangal. Korangal is the site of some of the worst, most violent fighting in the U.S. war in Afghanistan, and Hollie mentions that as well. One more thing, Naweed speaks Pashto. You're going to hear them talk about that. They do a good job of explaining why that's important. Afghanistan is a really diverse country. It's a big country, and there's lots of different languages and dialects specifically that are spoken. Pashto is the language that the Taliban uses. So Naweed was able to speak Pashto along with English, as you'll hear, and other dialects, languages. And so this is one of the things that he brought to the table that was really critical for Hollie's work, but also for the rest of us, because he was able to communicate directly with people that Hollie really needed to speak to, including in some situations like when she was detained in that area, Spin Boldak, along the Pakistan border. Again, a conversation that you're going to need to hear for yourself. I left the interview as it is. So that's a couple of the list of names that you need to know, places you need to know, something just to be aware of. There won't be a quiz on this later. I just wanted you to kind of have that in your ears already as you get ready for this conversation. I left this interview as it is. You're going to hear some people in the background at time. You're going to hear sort of the pause in the conversation because there's a discussion about the electricity going out. The interview doesn't stop, but you'll see both Hollie and Naweed sort of manage that. And that's actually really important because that's something that Kabul deals with on a regular basis. The electricity going on and off. That's something that Hollie had to deal with as a journalist working in the area. And that's something that's been part of life in Kabul. So it gives you an idea of, what is it like to live there now? What I think is also really important, and I don't want to not underscore this, is that you're going to be getting insight into a relationship that's critical for journalists and the perspective of someone who is living in Kabul now, that was living in the country before, is living in Kabul now, that understands the transition that has taken place, what it's like to actually live under Taliban rule. Listen carefully for the notable changes over the last year that Naweed mentions. Listen to how he's talking about how his own work has changed and what he's watching, because no matter what anyone is saying from this point, no matter what you hear from any other news outlet at this point, you're going to hear for yourself the story of Afghanistan today from a local that has seen many things, witnessed many things with his own eyes, is walking the streets on a regular basis. And there's very few things as powerful as that, as powerful as someone's own story. And I'm very grateful to both Hollie and Naweed for taking the time to share this with us. I hope you really enjoy it.
So I'm here today for Smarter News. And as many of you probably remember last year that I was in Afghanistan with my photographer, Jake Simkin, when it fell. And we decided that we would stay through to the end of the year, which a lot of journalists didn't, but we both thought that it was really important. And some of you also probably got to know Naweed, who of course is a good friend of mine, but he, after the fall, was a fixer for Jake and I. So it's been almost a year, so we wanted to kind of catch up and talk about life. It's been crazy how fast time has gone.
It has really been crazy, and it was a crazy year though, and a crazy start to the year with you guys.
Absolutely. So just to recap a little bit, a lot of you are probably asking what a fixer is. And a fixer is somebody that's very special to journalists. And we work in foreign countries. We rely on locals, people that can help us set up interviews, that can translate, that understand the lay of the land and the logistics. And it's a really, really important job. It's sort of like a producer. They're very much part of our team. And Jake and I were lucky enough to work with Naweed in a very strange time. And just to sort of recap, being a fixer is also a very it's a dangerous job, because as journalists we do eventually get to leave, but somebody like Naweed, he has to stay there. And in many cases, if the Taliban doesn't like what the journalist has written, then it's Naweed who has to sort of deal with that quite terrifying wrath. Is that something that you've been experiencing over the past year at all, Naweed?
Yes, we did. I had experiences, and we both of with you guys also we had an experience. Remember the Boldak experience?
Oh,
We were
yes.
detained for 3 hours,
Yes,
and
we can talk about
we
that. That was certainly memorable.
yes, and afterwards we faced few situations which was memorable to me. Like just the other day, we were going to Al Zawahiri's house where it was targeted by drone strike, and the Taliban was super hostile. They didn't want anyone around the house, and they told us clearly to our face, saying like, if we see you around here again, we will not tolerate you, and you will be beaten up. And they had already beaten 2 fixers on the same day.
So what happened when you went to the house? Was it destroyed?
They didn't allow us to see anything. It was fully secured. And as soon as we got to the door of the house, Taliban came and told us like, you should leave. Even no single journalist was allowed to visit the house. No single journalist.
So just to recap a little bit, Zawahiri was wanted by the United States government for many, many years. He was bin Laden's right-hand man. And of course, when bin Laden was killed in 2011, Zawahiri took the reins as the leader of al-Qaeda. And it was always very unclear where he was. He is an Egyptian man, a doctor, and he was sort of getting on a little bit. I think at this point, he was about 71 or 72. And it was just very unclear whether he was even still alive at this point. But obviously, the US intelligence had pinpointed him to a house right in the middle of Kabul, which is crazy. And over sort of this past Saturday, as we're speaking here, which is in the beginning of August, he was killed in a drone strike. And so certainly that's really big news that the Taliban is obviously trying to squash.
It's really a big news, and Taliban are really trying hard on it. And on top of it, the Taliban's 1 year is about to complete. Muharram is coming, so the situation was already tight. And then the Zawahiri drone attack happened. So it was just something unexpected, and all the journalists were in the country to see what is going to happen in the 1 year of Taliban. And then the Zawahiri news and everything changed.
Yeah.
And nobody was allowed to go nearby.
Now, it's really kind of, I guess it's embarrassing in some ways for the Taliban. It's concerning for them, I think, at this point in trying to establish diplomatic relations with the US and the rest of the world. The fact that this al-Qaeda leader, was living basically in plain sight in Kabul. What do you think the ramifications of that are going to be in Afghanistan?
Unfortunately, having such a person in the country while you are in government That will increase the sanctions we already have in place that we can expect, and people will be affected badly due to things which they haven't done anything with. It's a governmental change politics, but the common people will be affected anyhow, being trade-wise, being the Afghanistan a dependent country on aid. It's not a country which stands on its own. So that will be affected. And generally, now the word will be out that Afghanistan has become the house of the terrorists once again.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, those things are going to happen.
I hope that if anything, that the Taliban and the Haqqanis, that they all learn sort of a lesson from this. And if there are other hugely wanted people in the country, that they do something to ensure that they're no longer in the country, because it really will hurt Afghanistan, I think.
It really will. I fully agree with you. In case something like this happens, Afghanistan is a dependent country, as I said earlier, and when a country is dependent on others, and having such activity will just decrease the possibilities of getting some help, the donations that are coming through.
Do you think Afghanistan can ever reach a point where it's not dependent on other countries? I think when we look at the past 20 years, really what was created was this artificial economy, where 85%, I would even beg to say more than 90% of people were employed in some way through the government, which was of course backed by the United States, or they were with an NGO or a contracting company, or somehow they were part of this sort of war economy. And then when that literally crumbled overnight on August 15th of 2021, when the former government fled and the Taliban just had carte blanche to come in and take Kabul as the United States was withdrawing, how do you know, and that was all gone. So, you know, is it a mistake for Afghanistan to continue this model of outside reliance?
This model doesn't work for any country. Afghanistan is a good example of it. The more you're reliant on others, and the day those people want to leave, you have nothing left. When you were here, you saw what the condition of people were. Everybody wanted to leave the country due to a single reason. There was no job market, there was no security, nobody was job security, and nobody were assured that what will happen next. Because the government was gone, there was a superpower which was in country backing the previous government, and that was gone. And that, if Afghanistan can stand somehow, at least have some basic factories, basic job creation, like at least employ 100,000 or 200,000 people in their factories. And then obviously around 300,000 or 500,000 people are currently employed by government. So that will help the country back and keep people the country will stand on its own feet back. But that needs a lot of work. And establishing job market is not something very easy that comes easily. But if the governments work hard on it and try to work with the private sector, and not in the previous government, the only problem was that they were more focusing on the NGOs. They were not working on the private sector. There was almost no private sector. It was only a few companies which were making money out of the NGOs, the government, the US contractors, or the US government itself. But there was no actual economy built. And that's what caused the August 15. As soon as the August 15 occurred, everything was done. All the NGOs left, the contractors left, everybody left. Though some of them have returned back, the big NGOs like Save Children International, they say we never left, like Norwegian Refugee Council or Dutch Committee for Afghanistan. These big NGOs, they're still in country, but they don't have as much activity as they used to have. They say we don't have enough funding for that.
It's certainly problematic. But let's go back to a year ago, August 15th. I remember Jake and I were actually in Mazar. We didn't know you at this point, and Mazar had fallen the day before that on the 14th. So we were in a little bit of a predicament of not being able to get out, and sort of at that point, we just didn't know what the Taliban, how they would react to foreigners. I didn't know how they'd react to a woman. I didn't know how they'd react to a foreign journalist. So we were sort of in a really difficult situation there for a few days until we finally actually just went and talked to the Taliban. And at that point, I think the Taliban was still really very much trying to be this kind of beacon of welcoming, or trying to reset a lot of the image that they'd had in the 90s. So they're actually very friendly to us, and sort of said, you're welcome to stay in the country, and we'll get you permission to stay, and that sort of thing. So once Jake and I had sort of discussed that a little bit in Uzbekistan, we decided to come back. And I remember getting back to our particular house in Kabul, and we're sort of sitting there, and all the fixers we knew had gone. So both of us had worked a lot in the country. Jake had lived there for many years, and everybody we knew had either fled or was trying to flee or was in hiding. So certainly nobody was really brave enough to want to come out and confront the Taliban. And we were deciding what we're going to do. And I was getting a bunch of LinkedIn messages from people that was still in Kabul that was sort of saying, do you need help? Do you need help? They saw that I was writing from there. And I just happened to read yours, and you looked like you had a good track record in working in business and in Kabul. And I remember I said to Jake, just let's bring him to the house and see if he's nice. And also at that point, what was really important was that you spoke Pashto as well as Dari. So for 20 years, everybody just spoke Dari, which is a Persian dialect. But of course, Taliban does all their communication in Pashto, which was another bit of a problem, because there are a lot of people who don't speak Pashto in Afghanistan. So you said you spoke both, and I remember you sort of came to the house, and we had a nice chat. And I think the first job, and Jake and I were like, well, we don't know if you're Taliban, but we had to go with our instinct and say, he seems normal, he seems nice. And I think the first job we did was actually going to the emergency hospital in Kabul.
Yes.
Where a lot of people had been. At that point, a lot of people were actually in there for injuries, not just from war, but they were in injuries because the Taliban was out shooting in celebration of that particular night that they took Panjshir Valley. So you had a lot of people that had been shot, and I'm on the board for emergency, so it's something really important to me. And I remember we went together, and I think that is also when a huge riot broke out. I remember as we were going to leave, it was just one gunshot right outside after another, and so we're all like running kind of to hide, and we weren't able to leave. And that was our baptism by fire.
I remember the day very well, and that's how we started. We went to emergency, and the fighting started, and everybody was running, everybody. And we somehow managed to escape the place and came back in 20 minutes. And within those 20 minutes, remember the Talib asking us, where were you in the first half? Remember? And we were fully surrounded.
I remember seeing, so we decided, well, I had to go out and cover what was going on, and I had to go out and cover. They were trying to break up a protest, and they were doing it, of course, with shooting into the air and sort of capturing people that had been participating. It was a lot of different women and people that were very upset about the Taliban takeover. And I remember trying to get so many different perspectives, talking to people on the street about what had happened, talking to protesters that were hiding. And then, of course, I wanted to go and talk to the Taliban as well. And I remember them all just being in this truck and saying, well, I need to interview. And Naweed, you marched over there and talked to them, and you were all brave. And then you came back to me and you were like, that was the first time I talked to them. But you certainly were like, went up there and just, even though at that point they were arresting a lot of fixers and detaining them because they had taken journalists to the protests. But you had a special way with them in the way that you were able to obviously communicate my need for an interview.
I believe that's a skill set required for a fixer, because if you don't have that skill, you cannot survive. And within those few minutes, honestly, that was my first interview. They were in Kabul August 15, and I remember August 15 very well. They were riding the bikes on the street. You were in Mazar at the time, where you went outside Tashkent once, I believe. And so when the bikes were on the street, people were just watching them. And we, being the Republic, we lived longer with the Republic. So it was a bit strange to us as well. We couldn't even manage to speak to them before I believe it was September 3rd or 4th when we started working.
Yeah.
And that time it was super strange to me as well. When they surrounded us fully with all those intelligence cars and intelligence people around us, it was super strange. But thankfully, you were strong enough to stand tall and ask the question, and I stood tall to get their view on the questions. I believe that was the best start we could get.
Yeah, it was. And then I think after that, another really memorable moment. So you have to remember, right in the beginning, it was very different to what it is now. We were like able to just walk freely up to these ministries, remember, and just say hi. We had a letter. We had a letter from Mujahid's office that gave us permission to work as journalists. And so we were just sort of able to kind of walk up to ministries or basically get access to whatever we wanted to. And at that point, the Taliban didn't really know how to govern or how to deal with this new role as leaders. And so I just remember being fascinated because it was so different to sort of all the security elements that we had to go through previously. And suddenly it was like, okay, this is so bizarre. And then there was that one incident where you told me about a school, a kindergarten that was just sort of on the edges of Kabul. And you said, look, I think some funny things are happening here, and you'd heard some rumors. And those rumors obviously being that it was a school to train suicide bombers. And Jake and I looked at each other and said, well, we have to go. And we drove to this kindergarten, this nondescript. There was no signs. There was sort of no signs of the Taliban really even being there. And I remember you just sort of walking up with us, and I'm sort of standing behind and knocking on the door and basically just being like, I'm knocking on a door of a suicide bombing school and we'd like to come in.
That was an amazing experience to get their perspective on though. And we just walked through, and for me the best thing was being the local, speaking the language. It was the biggest advantage I have, and I had it. So with Taliban it went well, and these are people from villages, these are people from the town. So if you speak how they behave and how you treat them, they open up. And I think that was the key to everything. And when we got to the school, I think that's one of the memorable days of my life. We learned a lot about them. We learned how they think, what they do. I think that was an amazing story you did.
I just remember being wedged in the corner, and there was, all these Taliban commanders kind of sitting there, and they all had their guns pulled up around me, and I'm sitting there trying to conduct an interview, and one of them had the door blocked and the commander was out. And I was just like, sometimes you just put it to faith, right? That you're not going to ask the question that's going to piss them off too much, or that someone's not going to get trigger happy, or it's funny when you sort of look back at the situations. And sometimes I look back at the photos Jake took and I think, oh gosh, you put a lot of faith in other people, or at that point having to put faith in the Taliban in order to kind of get the story. And that's really what we had to do.
That was the only option at the time, and we didn't have anything else to do with. That's the only thing we could do. I think that's where you found the trust on me, that I was not a Talib.
Yeah. And then it was sort of this bizarre paradox where one minute, you're in this little room of suicide bombers and you're interviewing them. The next minute, I remember the commander started to get angry. He was standing outside and was like, wrap up, because of the questioning. And so we sort of did. And then we were outside, and suddenly, they're inviting you for tea. And it's all very bizarre because, you're at a suicide bombing school run by the Taliban, by one of their special units. And then at the same time, it's in a kindergarten, and then they have a little mat set out for you to have tea with them. It's very hard to wrap your head around it in the moment. It seems very surreal.
I don't know what to say, because at that moment, that's what it was. And Afghanistan is an unpredictable country. That's what I tell every journalist. So in case you want to come to the country, prepare as much as you can. But the moment you come in, you will see new things. You will always have different have new experiences. And the thoughts you have, they will change. The plan you have, that will change. So that's something Afghanistan is.
Yeah, and I also remember one of the significant times being when we had to, coordinate trying to get into Panjshir Valley, which at that point it was very unclear whether it had fallen or it hadn't, because you're hearing, yes, it had fallen, but then a lot of the Panjiris and people that were, good friends of mine were saying, no, it hasn't. So it's just very unclear. There was so much mixed messaging. There was so much fake news being spread. It was very hard to understand. And so we figured that the only way we were really going to understand was to actually go there, which at that point it was closed off. So I know that took a lot of coordination on your end to get those permissions, and then for us to kind of sneak our way in there. And then that was a really challenging time for me, I think, as a journalist, because when we went there, it was very evident, and that was in early September, that it had fallen, that we went through all of those 8 districts, and the Taliban clearly controlled each of those. And then I think there wasn't really much evidence that there was any huge fighting. I think we heard a little bit of gunfight, a little bit of gunshots, and maybe a couple of rockets, but not many. And they seemed like they were outgoing rather than incoming as we were sort of there. And so, and really, I think in just trying to portray what I saw, what I knew, what I could as a journalist to the best of my capability, in my experience in many different war zones, I'd actually never experienced the kind of backlash that came from just reporting the truth. And suddenly I was some sort of Taliban lover, and I wasn't reporting, and of course it hadn't fallen, and how dare I, and I was getting just horrible threats. And it was quite a learning experience for me, because I just, to that degree, had never experienced it. And I just remember sitting on the steps, I think with Jake, and I was just in tears, like, am I doing more damage than good being here? And I remember you and Jake were both really supportive of me, and I just had to get through it and stand by everything that I saw. And after all, we were the ones there seeing these things with our own eyes, and the people were the keyboard warriors were quite far away. So but it was difficult, that one.
It was really difficult, but the worst part was the backlash. To be honest, that was the worst. And till date, even other journalists, they see the same backlash. Whenever there's a report on Panjshir, whenever there's something said about Panjshir, they will have all the backlash saying you're a Talib sympathizer, you're working for Taliban. Even now, they will call you, if you report on something which is not in their favor, they will call you the intelligence now, Talib intelligence. So that's something that we were the first to experience it, because before us, nobody had entered Panjshir at that time. And it was, I believe, the 8th day Taliban entered Panjshir, 8. When we got into Panjshir, and we came back on the same day, but we managed to see all 8 districts. We went through the street right from the main door to where it reached Badakhshan. It was an amazing experience, but the main part of the story was that there was no fight on the streets. Nobody was firing, like, you couldn't see a single house being bombarded. You couldn't see a single car or something which shows sign of war. And still they were saying, like, there's a fight happening, thousands of people are dying, and this was happening. But unfortunately, till date, that's happening. And anybody who reports on that, and they say, like, the backlash comes to it automatically. Even last week, I had a report. And the people, when we interviewed them, later on, the journalist was told that you were here with a Talib. I told them, like, I can't do anything with that. I am Pashtun, and I don't deny that. But calling me a Talib, that's the wrong way to describe it.
Absolutely. That was crazy. And I remember, this is always the challenge of being a woman working in different countries. I've had this happen before, but I think I remember I needed to use the bathroom. We went to a mosque, and the caretaker took me around the back to use the bathroom. And I remember him kind of waiting around outside as I came out, and then him following me in there and sort of grabbing me. And I remember just being shocked, because I was shocked, and sort of having to push him off. And I quickly ran away. And as I came out, I saw 2 Talibs sort of standing there. It was almost as if they suspected him, or they were waiting for something to happen. And one of them sort of asked me if I was okay. And I was a little bit rattled. And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. I didn't want to see the man get punished or beaten up or anything for, obviously doing something that is very much in violation of their code. And I don't even think I told you. I think I said something to Jake a little bit later because I was worried you would go after him as well. And then you were kind of mad at me that I didn't tell you straight away so you could. Yeah.
That you should have told me at that time, because that's something in violation of every code in the country. And that's not acceptable at all. I don't know why you hide it, because that guy, I still can't forget it, to be honest.
Yeah, it's always the trouble with those situations. And then
being a woman, you see that those challenges.
Yeah,
I agree on that.
It is a challenge. Thank you for looking out for me. I think that was really cemented was we went to Kandahar. So again, that was the other strange part when the Taliban took over, is suddenly you could access all of the country, which we couldn't when it was at war. And so we sort of were able to do a lot of traveling. And of course, we had our permission letters as journalists, which is very important for checkpoints. So we did a really long drive to Kandahar. It was long. Gosh, it was long, wasn't it? In the tiny little car.
12 hours.
Hot and like hours. I think I was the DJ, and so every Taliban band's music, so we would blast the music or whatever we were listening to, the rap music or whatever Shafiq liked, and then we'd turn it down. We got to a checkpoint anyway. So we get to Kandahar, and that was in September. Kandahar is one of my favorite cities, if not probably my favorite city in Afghanistan, just because I thought it was fun and it was clean, and people just having Kandaharis are known, they have a reputation for being just fun and liking to travel and being kind of good spirited people. I always remember another journalist friend of mine saying, after he went to Panjshir after us, and of course it's a deserted sort of military zone, and he saw a family kind of wandering up and down the street, and he asked them where they were from, and of course they were from Kandahar, and they just wanted to see what was happening. That's what Kandaharis do. They like to just travel around the country and see what's going on. Anyway, so we get there, and then we got our permission, and when you get to a place, you have to go and visit the director of culture director.
Yes, media director.
Let them know that you're sort of there, and get their permission to sort of freely go off and do your stories. So we wanted to go down to Spin Boldak, which is the border of Pakistan and Afghanistan in Kandahar. I remember we got there and thought it would be just a quick trip down and back. That was the plan. And we just wanted to see what's happening at the border. And we got there, and I just remember just being mobbed. And it was just hundreds of people, just for some reason, I guess Jake with the camera, and then me, not being, I was obviously covered in hijab, but most of the women there are really fully covered in burqas. So they were able to kind of see that I was a journalist, and obviously I was trying to get interviews. And I just remember just hundreds of them just swarming. And I just remember like holding on to you and being like, do not let me go. Because again, it was just this feeling of absolutely being overpowered and mobbed everywhere we went. And kind of getting to a point where it felt like it wasn't safe. And when you have that feeling of just when you're attracting this much of unwanted attention, and you have that feeling of anything sort of dangerous could happen. This could be a site where somebody lets off a bomb. This could be a site where you're kidnapped. Like just anything could happen. I remember at one point, these Taliban people at the guards were they were whipping these people that were mobbing. And I just remember being really upset because I didn't want to be the cause of somebody getting hurt. But then it didn't seem to even bother them. They would just continue to mob or continue to follow. So I just was so confused. And I remember we tried to, we reunited with Jake, who's sort of gone off to take photos. And we tried to call Shafiq, our driver, who is Naweed's cousin, who we love. But Shafiq, one thing about Shafiq is Shafiq always likes to eat. Every time you turn around, Shafiq is found a friend who has food, or he's gone to get food. He loves his food. And we thought, okay, Shafiq, the car wasn't where we left it. and we didn't know where Shafiq was. And at first it was sort of funny. We're like, oh, Shafiq's gone to get food, but he wasn't answering his phone. And I just remember the sort of the Taliban leaders, they rolled up in these armored vehicles and they started asking us questions, and we kept saying, we're leaving. But of course we couldn't get a hold of Shafiq to actually leave. And after a while, they just were like, no, into the car. So we get into the police vehicle, and I remember I was very maybe naively so, but very calm. I knew it had to get resolved, which of course, if I look at situations now with friends and things who've been detained upwards of more than 6 months. So I think we were very lucky. They took us to the station, and I remember just we were left there for ages. Like me and Jake were sort of put in this room and like a tin of water. And you were filming us, I think, because the Taliban just sort of left us there. And so you were like filming us, and we were sort of making light of it. But I look back and I think, I'm lucky. And then eventually they all started to pile in and were hammering us with questions. And I'm giving them my letters, I'm giving them my Australian passport, I'm giving them my press card, everything we had. And they just looked at me and they said, it's all fake. I just remember thinking, how can I argue with this? It's not fake, but I don't know what I need to do to convince you it is. And then you were sort of engaging with them in Pashto. And then I looked at you at one point and I could see that you were starting to get really worried. And that's when I started to get a little bit worried, because at first it was sort of one of those things I thought, oh, this will be fine. And then when I could see that you were getting stressed, that's when I started to be like, oh, and I'm sort of in the back, and Jake's like, pretend to be sick. So I'm sort of pretending to be sick, and that didn't even work. They had zero sympathy for me. So yeah, that was a challenging sort of afternoon, wasn't it?
It was really challenging. It just started with Jake taking photo, remember?
Yeah.
When he started taking photos of the Pakistan border and Taliban came through, like, who are you? Basically, I think there was no journalist before us. We were the first to go there. So when with a new government, you do a new thing. And the strange thing was, like, those people are saying, you don't have the permission to work here. And we told them we have the permission from Kandar's media director. And he's responsible for everything.
And we have a letter from Mujahid's office.
Yeah, Mujahid's office plus a letter from the Kandar's media office as well. So we had 2 letters. But the Kandar media director, he told him that Boldak doesn't come in Kandahar. I was like shocked. How come? He said this is the border area, but still that comes under Kandahar. And they were like, he didn't support us at all. The Kandahar media director, he didn't support us at all.
Yeah, he really whacked his hands of us.
Yes, he's like, I don't know them. I don't know why they came to you and everything. But however, that was a crazy day. And I got tense due to the questioning intelligence team was having. They were like taking everything we had, sending it over to someone, and then asking more question and more question. Straight 3 hours inquiry, that's a long time. 3 hours, that's a long time. But still, we managed. And at last, they showed us around. So we were against them.
I think, thankfully, what happened, I guess somebody in Mujahid's office confirmed us, thankfully, and were able to confirm that we were journalists and that we weren't there as some sort of spies, because that's what they were trying to accuse us of doing, which is certainly really concerning. And that's something journalists always face a lot, is these accusations. And it's unfortunate, but it's a reality. And then they were very apologetic. Remember, they wanted to like show us around and give us exclusive access. Nope, I lost you.
Just a minute. I lost electricity.
Welcome to Kabul.
Welcome to Kabul. So, just a minute. I will manage something.
It must be late there. What time is it there?
It's like 11:10.
11:10. But you don't sleep.
No, I sleep at 12.
Sleep.
So.
He stays up
never sleep.
3 hours and then he's up again in the early morning.
That's what we do.
Freak of nature.
Yeah, just a minute. What's the shoe? Powerbank? Powerbank group.
Oh, that's the one thing I don't miss about Kabul is you get such a limited window of electricity, and then you've got to go turn on the generator, and then it's noisy and it's difficult, especially in the depths of summer, which is what you guys are experiencing now, where it's sweltering hot and you don't have AC or fans to run.
Unfortunately, that's the Kabul. So
That's
welcome
always
to
been the way
Kabul.
with Kabul. You know, that is certainly not new under the Taliban. That's just always been the problem.
Yes, I don't know how do you. It's
Oh,
the
I
camera.
have you back. Hi.
Hi, welcome.
So yeah, that was a really eventful time, and then we went to Mullah Omar's mosque as well. We drove up to there, so that was really kind of a fascinating slice of history. And again, I wasn't sure how they were going to regard me, you know, being a woman and being, you know, not covered in a burqa, and that was sort of strange. And I got there, and it seemed like they were looking for another wife.
The fourth wife. He already had
Yeah.
15 children. 15 children. So
Yeah,
the fourth wife was required.
he had 15 children. That's right. This
That
is
was
the elder in the
that.
mosque. I was there with the imam who invited us for lunch.
So it was easy to make nikah. The mullah was there. The witnesses were there. Could just get married. Let's just keep it that way.
Crazy times. But gosh, we did some really interesting stories. We went into the jails where they had the meth addicts because they don't have established rehabs. We went really kind of all over, didn't we? It was a fascinating week we spent there.
We saw a lot of things there. A lot of things. The kid which was addicted to drugs, and then going over Helmand, going with that Talib guide, show us
Yeah.
around
And so,
the
you know, as we're going to, the Taliban says it's outlaws the poppies, but yet the Taliban are the ones that are the farmers that are showing us around their crops. So it certainly cements that narrative, the Taliban, you know, that banning, I don't know where it's at now, but at that point, they were still making good money out of those poppies.
they have removed it to certain limit, but that's not like 100% thing. So not 100%, but still they have managed to remove some of it. But that was something because our guide, he told us like during the day I would cultivate, and then when I was called up, I would just go and fight. Remember?
Absolutely, yeah. But gosh, we did a lot of road trips. There was what time we went to Kuna and up to
Korengo
Valley, which, you know, is just the craziest terrain to get up to. And I just think at one point I had to just close my eyes and not even look, because you're going up this ridge line in completely bald tires by this local who was taking us. And, you know, it's this sort of overweighted vehicle on a really tiny, thin ridge. And I just remember just closing my eyes and just praying it wasn't going to go over. I couldn't even look out the window.
The best part was Jake sitting in the front trying to shoot the street. He was like, if I didn't get over this one, then I can live long alive. If I can just get over the street, because that's something amazing. It's just, I don't know how the driver was driving, but the big stones, and then there is not enough space even to have another car on your side. So only one car can go through, and then there is nothing to prevent you from dropping down. And it's just if you go one step on the other side and you're done. And you're seeing the depth of the mountain from top. It was a crazy drive, a really crazy one.
Yeah, I think that probably counts as one of my most hairy road trips. It was into Kuna. That was certainly really, you know, but fascinating. And the Korengo Valley obviously has an important place with the US forces there, but a fascinating place that we met some really, you know, lovely local people and who were in a very difficult situation. So, you know, I was very grateful for their time. What else? Nuristan. We went to Nuristan, which is a place that you hadn't been, that you wanted to go.
Yes.
And that was sort of in the very beginning of winter. And so it was freezing and we're in a place that didn't have any heating. I remember we had to start fires every night just to kind of get some warmth. But that was we went hiking. I think you got sick, you got altitude sickness. Jake was really sick. but I was running up the mountain there.
Holly, the fitness. Holly, you're the fittest. Like, I don't know how many rounds you did on that mountain. I just like handed over, no more. I sat down because I got super sick that day. And you, I don't know, like 10, 15 rounds, you went up and down, up and down. So,
Just trying to get my
salute.
workout in. That's the hardest thing I always miss when I'm traveling is I usually, some countries, I can go outside and go for a run, but that wouldn't have gone down well in Afghanistan. So I had to kind of do like jump ropes in my room and jumping jacks, and I made a little obstacle hit workout for myself, really. But yeah, I enjoyed the chance to be able to kind of get out in the wilderness because I hadn't been able to do it.
You had the amazing stamina. Like, I remember going up the mountain against the TV Hill in Kabul when we hiked it with Jake Yarov and yes, Yarov and Jake were there with us. And those two were just staying back and we want to enjoy the mountain. It was an amazing hike.
And
And
then
it was
they
a
accused
crazy.
us of being thieves. Remember? We were accused of being thieves.
Yes, we were.
That's what happens when they see people hiking, because it's just not necessarily a thing in Afghanistan. So when they see a bunch of people running up a mountain or hiking up a mountain, their natural response is that they must be thieves, and that is not a nice position to be in either when there's people with guns at the top.
Basically, they had thieves at the area and they warned us like, you should be keeping yourself safe. At least have some gun or a guard with yourself to if you wanna go such heights. And they were afraid that we will be mobbed by, or mugged by some thieves on the top of the mountain.
That's right. Crazy times.
Crazy times.
I think one of the most memorable trips we did or stories we really did in all of it was to Jalalabad, to the area that we went to. So
Pepper heart.
we sort of found out there's an area just outside of Jalalabad in Nangarhar, which we went to a few times, but we found out there's this one particular area that was controlled basically by the Daesh, by the ISIS-K, which, before the US, that was really an Al-Qaeda hideout. Now it's an ISIS-K hideout. And it's really kind of this no-go zone. And so we kind of wanted to go and find out what was happening there, what it was like to be in a place that was run by ISIS-K, and how much of a no-go zone was that. So we kind of just took a decision to go. We decided we would do it in a very simple way, just in an ordinary car, and blend in as much as we could, rather than, trying to take any safety extra, armored vehicles and things like that we thought would just draw attention to ourselves. I remember I sort of covered up pretty much completely except for my eyes. And we just kind of went. And that was what we did. And that was just, I remember, my heart sort of pounding the whole time. And I sort of told a couple of friends, security friends of mine in the US what I was doing, and they all tried to talk me out of it the day before, and I was persistent. But we went, and it was sort of fascinating. I remember getting to that one spot. So it was basically a place where the Taliban kind of controls it during the day, and then they leave at night because they're scared. And every person you talk to will just have these stories about the amount of bodies that they found yesterday, or the heads that they found in the well, or whatever it is. And it was just sort of horrific. I remember we got to that market, and I remember seeing a guy looking at us and looking in at the car at Jake's camera, and then getting on his flip phone and getting on his flip phone. And I just remember having this instinctual feeling of like, I don't like this. And I said to Jake, we've got to be fast. And we continued to go further into that road where there was just nobody, right? I remember driving, and even the Taliban just disappeared, and you're sort of in the Wild West, really. And then I remember getting to another market, and that guy, I think you went into the store, and he'd said something about, is this the car that they were expecting? And he was on his phone.
The guy said something like that, but I don't remember exactly. And when he said he called the guy, that's the moment we got the instincts that we should be keeping ourselves secure. And the moment we got into the village and tried to blend in, I believe there were 3 groups we crossed, and all of them were just following us up. And I think that's the moment we decided, like, no more. Though
Yeah.
we saw the Chapaha, we went deep in. Taliban didn't care about it. Remember when we went to their district, and it's like you can go anywhere you want, and nobody will touch you. And then when we got deep into Chapahar, that's a different story.
Totally. Yeah, really fascinating slice of history. Probably not the smartest decision we've ever done in our life, but one that we felt was a story that needed to be told. So I'm glad we did it. I just, yeah, I
Remember
looked
the
back at that chapter.
remember
And,
the canals. Remember the canals where they put the heads of people, the
yeah,
beheaded peoples. That was a crazy place we went in. And at Chaparha, we were not sure whether there will be ISIS or not. But then that canal area, we knew there were ISIS, but still we digged deeper. And we went to the drone strike house where the US government did the drone strike on ISIS team.
one of the planners of the airport attack that killed
Yes.
Americans when they were withdrawing. Yeah.
That was a crazy area. You couldn't
You could
see
feel
people
it. You
around.
could feel it. And then the sun was
Just get
going
the
down.
feeling.
And I just remember thinking, like, the sun's going down. This is when they come out. Like, we need to get out of here.
It was something, I don't know. How do you explain it? I just don't have the words for it. But it was just the gut feeling we got, like, this is not the area. That was a crazy area.
Yeah. But what a, you know, we did so many trips. We did to Rat, we did all kinds of places, and it was I mean, it was a
Rolling
tense
mullahs,
time.
remember? Rolling mullahs, remember?
Rolling, yeah. We went to this Sufi mosque, where one of the traditions is you roll along the ground, which usually only men do, but I insisted on doing it, and the poor young boy was running it, didn't really know what to do, but that they let me do it. And you know, Sufis are the mystics in the Muslim world, and it was a beautiful mosque, and we had a nice time. And I think Naweed and I managed to find hookah places everywhere we went, because we both like to smoke some hookah sometimes and get some good yogurt. And I think you know, despite all the sort of stress of the situation, we tried to find fun moments in it all. And of course, you know, I miss those things a lot. I miss Afghanistan. I hope to get back there very shortly and hang out with you and go to some of the places. I hope they're still there. I'm sure it'll be a very different landscape to what it was during that time.
It has totally changed. It's not the same anymore. Now there are thousands of permissions for everything. Today I was getting a permission for a school, a girls' school, and I was told that only women can enter the place. Neither cameraman nor the producer can get in. So no fixer, nothing. I was told the journalist, like, can you do it? And then I was like, what will I do then? And it said we were making a documentary for a TV show, without video, without the words. I don't know how things were working, but they have been changing rules on daily basis. And now almost on everyday basis, you get a new rule. The life has become, it's not as easy. Remember the open offices? And I got to walk to the Prime Minister's office 2 times. When we were trying to get the interview with, I believe, Mullah Yaqub or Mullah Hassan, either of them. And then there was nobody on the doors. You just walk in, get to the office, and get into a Prime Minister's office without being asked once.
That's right. It was crazy. It was the Wild West in the beginning, and then
I
it
really
certainly
liked
started to crack down. They did let us go into the airport though eventually and see the military side. That was sort of later, not long before I left, and that was really interesting. And I remember I asked the airport director how he got his job running Kabul airport. And he basically said he walked in. He just walked in on the day of the sort of everything was happening when the US was withdrawing, and he was picked for the job because he was there. And I thought, wow, that's quite the And it's an important one because that's the airport we're flying in and out of. So fingers crossed with that. But I just really look forward to catching up with you. Naweed is like my big brother, even though I'm older than him, but he's twice my height.
I'll be looking forward to receiving you. And I remember we couldn't say goodbye last time, but I will welcome you only this time.
That's right. I got Naweed to come with me to the airport when I was leaving, and there were just people everywhere, and there was a separate line for women and men. And so I was in sort of the line with the women, and of course much shorter, because nobody's really traveling and they're always trying to sort of get the women through fast. And I sort of went through one checkpoint and I looked and we couldn't go any further because we didn't have a ticket, and that was our goodbye. We didn't get a proper goodbye, so have to make up for it.
We'll make up for that.
You will. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on. I know it's late. Thank you so much to Smarter News and to Jenna for following our story and, continuing to remind people that Afghanistan is out there and that there's a lot of people that, are still really in need of help, and that there are important stories to still be told, even though it's not headline news anymore. And and thank you to Naweed and the fixers that really, we wouldn't be able to do our jobs without you. I know you take enormous risks working with foreigners and doing what you do. And so we really just value that. And thank you.
Thank you for telling the story of Afghanistan and being the voice for the people, because without the international media, it's impossible to have the word out and let the world know that what's actually happening inside the country. And we really thank you for that. The risk we take, that's for the country. And the support we get from you guys, that's amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. And for those of you who kind of want a little bit more of our visual aspect of our journey, we also have a coffee table book coming out probably in December, I believe, and it will just sort of be capturing beautiful photos by Jake, and I did the writing. And of course, we couldn't have done it without Naweed helping us produce it all together. And that is a book that's coming out. So we will also get the links up for that too. So thank you again for all your support.
Quick, concise, nonpartisan, Smarter News, a refuge from the storm. I'm Jenna. Thank you for choosing Smarter.